Let's quickly check the audio. It's always something I have to do at the start of the stream. It's always something seems to be as good as it can be. Alright, we're going to be testing Genesis Pro today. We are going to be testing Genesis Pro. I haven't really played a lot with this whole thing. I'm gonna do like a whole review video on it, so I'm gonna take some notes here and we'll explore it a bit together. I do have a few things I want to already write down because I have played with it a little bit. And the first thing I have to say about it is that it doesn't open with an initialized preset. Right, you open up with this. Let's quickly route our MIDI or our keyboard here. I am Genesis, virtual hybrid synthesizer. So it opens up like that with a nice vocally sound, which is often is fairly useful. You kind of get what the synth is capable of. But in this case, it's not really that easy because I don't think you can actually work with this sound. At least as I can see, all the main oscillators are off. Here we have a multi-wave that is off. It's not in this one. And in fact, if you turn on the main any of the main oscillators, like the mod oscillator here, you get an extra sound. Also, while I'm playing, you might notice that there is a bit of an audio problem right now. It's still very early in development, kind of, I would say. There are a lot of problems. Because I'm running a bridged version, they have some audio problems. There's also a lot of performance issues for people using very low spec computers. So that's a big problem. And I think overall there is a few very minor tweaks they should do to the workflow to just make it a lot faster. One of which being that there is no real place you can see all the automation. At least I don't know where that would be. We have this matrix over here where you can take any modulation source and just send it somewhere. But there's also other ways you can modulate. For example, you can take LFOs and I believe you can just show them automatically. Like if we take a closer look to Serum, right? Let me quickly put this here. If we open up Serum, there is one place where you can see every modulation. For example, if I modulate this thing, I can now see it here. But if I click on the second LFO to use that as a modulation source, I can no longer see it. Genesis also suffers from this, where you can only see like one or a certain amount of modulation events going on at the same time. But what Serum does, it has this one matrix where everything is. And as opposed to Genesis, which does have a mod matrix, right, like this one. But this is only a small amount of the modulation that is going on. For example, we have these two ADSRs here, which the first is for the volume, which is almost like a standard nowadays. It's also in Serum, and that actually doesn't show up in the matrix. You just have to know that that's how it works. The second one is routed to the filter cutoff by default, and you can use this and you can set an amount. But as you can see now, if I open up these ADSR things, you can see we can start routing through here, right? You can, for example, go to ADSR 1, you can go to number 2, number 3, number 4, and that way you can start routing things to all kinds of different things here, which is really cool. There's a huge amount of things you can modulate in this plugin. I would say more than in Serum, so there is a lot bigger options, but there is no clear way to kind of see all your modulations at once. So that's something I want to write down. And hopefully they might fix that in the future, like just an extra button here, which allows you to kind of scroll through a list of all the modulations you have and edit them and do that. Either that or just clarify where it is, if there is even one. There's a lot of things that aren't really visual from the start. Like when I wanted to open up a preset and just kind of browse presets, the first thing I did was this load, which allows you to open up a file, which doesn't really help. Then I went to here and I saw, where was it? Here. You can go into the browse section and just open up. It has the same drop down that Silent used to have, where you just have a list of the available presets, which is not really something you would expect in a soft synth nowadays. You would have a nice little preset browser. And as you can see here, this is not the case here. You have this thing. But then I discovered that there is actually a preset browser. It's just buried one layer below. You go into the menu function, and then you can go to the preset browser, and you actually have a really cool preset browser with the different categories here, and then you can choose from a list of the presets here. Right, you have, for example, all these kinds of things. Okay, I'm modulating or playing the wrong thing. So you can browse presets, it's just very annoying. It's layered below something where you would normally not click. I would normally go into a main menu to check for a preset browser. If there is a browse button here and I see that this thing opens up a preset browser. Yes, it's popping on my end. I don't think you were here when I started the stream. One of the first things I mentioned is that this is kind of still in development, and they rolled it out, but they had a lot of problems with the 64-bit version, and because I run Ableton, I had to bridge it myself, and that's where the popping comes from. They are working on fixing that, and yeah, that's just one of the problems from releasing it, and they just didn't have the capabilities of testing it, I think. But this is a widespread issue, and they are working on actually fixing that. There are a few things like the GUI not opening for some people, which is a problem, and they're all trying to fix those problems. So, and they said they were gonna do that this week or next week, so I think that will be fixed very, very soon. I am going to try to ignore it when I'm like testing sounds and stuff, and we kind of just have to work with it and assume that it's not there to kind of test them out. I'm just gonna go through my thoughts on the workflow, and we'll design some sounds together inside this synth, and we'll see what we can do. One of the first things I wanted to talk about is a little bit the initializing preset. As I showed before, if we open up a new instance, it doesn't actually open up with an initialized patch. It opens up with their welcoming patch. Takes a little while. This is also a problem they're gonna fix, is the high CPU usage. That has partially to do with the way JBridge works, so they're gonna try to work together to kind of optimize the plugin for bridging and all kinds of stuff. So it opens up like this, which is the I am Genesis virtual hybrid synthesizer. That's all fine, right? It's slightly annoying that you don't open it up with an initialized patch, but you can work with that usually once you dive into it. Like for example, Spire also does it, where it opens up a preset and you just have to go here and initialize the patch. But in this case, it's still not initialized. Well, it's semi-initialized. It's not a sine wave or a basic wave. That's like silent demo I have. The silent demo thing is different, right? It has to do with their active. Yeah, also silent has that, where it doesn't open with the initialized patch. But the problem here with this patch or this particular plugin is even if you click the init preset, we still don't have a very nice usable sound. We have this weird semi-initialized preset. What you actually need to do is you need to turn this up, you turn the FM down, you turn the phase down, and then you turn down both multipliers, and you turn the sustain up, and maybe you want to tweak the release a little bit or something. But now we have a nice initialized sine wave thing. So that's something I would consider working with, just an initialized preset like all the way. Because now it's like you start off with something that is not quite what you would expect out of an initialized preset. And some people might find that confusing. And all those kind of little optimizations like that, I was recording a little video yesterday for first impressions. I might or might not upload that. But one of the things I really said was that this is a really bad thing. You could just be able to click the button and it would switch between them rather than open up a menu and change between those, because you already know, okay, the user clicked this thing, then you can just make it switch between the two. And maybe same for here, what they could use is maybe 2 arrows so you can quickly browse between them without having to open a menu. Right? Like if you know you're in the, let's say, amp section and you want to go to stereo analyzer, it would be much more easier if you would just have one of, for example, these arrows right next to here, and you could just click it once instead of having to click it twice. It's these little optimizations that makes your workflow with a plugin so much faster. But it's something we have to get used to, because I do want to actually work with this and see what kind of sounds I can get out of it. So I kind of want to explore the multiple oscillators. We have a standard oscillator here where you have 2 waves, and the second one is the modulator of the first one, and you can do FM with it, so you'd get a nice little FM sound. And then we also have a filter for that, which I'm not really sure what that does. Maybe it has to do with more complex waveforms, maybe. Either the first or the second. If we put this back to a sine wave, it doesn't really seem to change anything. I would normally go into a manual to check, but my version, my installer, didn't actually come with a manual, which is kind of odd. Maybe it has to do with the mix here, because even though we're FMing one with the other, we're still hearing both waves. So maybe if we do this, it might change it a little bit. Either that or this. Okay, so that's a knob, we don't know what it does. There is a few other functions. We have this surface function, which is, let's quickly turn it down a little bit so we can actually hear. It feels like a somewhat widening effect. It does a strange kind of detuning. I don't really know what it is. Maybe we can check it out if we render it out as a waveform so we can analyze it. Let's quickly open up a recording. Quickly record that and see what we get from that. Quickly put this aside, and then we'll turn the button down and record it again. Oh, I don't want to record this now because we already have this. Let's see. Yeah, there are some errors in the recording, but we just have to deal with it. If we quickly grab like an extract of both of them and kind of zoom in on them, you might be able to spot the difference and see what it actually does. It doesn't really look like anything weird is going on. I wouldn't be able to tell what it is. You might be able to see slight changes in the waveform, but it's really a subtle difference. If you like really zoom in, you can't really tell that there's anything wrong. You can see some peaks are like a little bit lower than others, and maybe it's a stereo thing. Let's see. We might be able to check if we can find a wave. Kind of want to sync these up together like this maybe, and check if we can see what the difference between these two is. Let's put this to resampling so we can actually check it. Well, we have to deal with the little bit of change there. Yeah, we don't really get anything from it. If we actually play just this, you can see there's a slight detuning effect here, but it's very subtle and it actually doesn't really show up on the waveform. Whereas this is much cleaner here. You can see it's a nice clean spike. Yeah, it doesn't seem to really do anything when I stereo or mono it. It just maybe I'm being stupid and doing something wrong. Maybe it has to do with the fact that yeah. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. I do see that the extra two spikes here. It almost seems like it's just adding some extra detune to the whole thing, but that would be really weird seeing as you also have a detune thing. This kind of makes sense if you look at like the graph above it, where it's actually offsetting the waves too. Like that would normally happen too if we listen to this, right? This is, you can hear that it's actual detuning. But what this means, the graph above, I don't know. It almost looks like it's illustrating reverb, which would be really weird at this stage of the synthesis thing. So I'm gonna write down these two buttons, the FM filter and the surface, which we don't know what it does. Next I want to kind of go over the normal ones, like the shape that kind of makes it a little bit more square, gives it a few more harmonics. At least it should. Right. Maybe it only works on the first one. Ah, okay, so maybe here we have this shape thing. It's showing up the graph here, but it's actually turned off in here. If you look at this thing, sometimes for some buttons this opens up like its own little menu, right? And here we have the unison settings, which I really didn't pay attention to before. But this might also explain, for example, this thing. The FM filter, let's say we're put it on invert FM, maybe we get a little bit of a change. If we oh, this doesn't seem to do anything. You have to turn it on. Okay, so you have to actually turn it on before this button does something. Let's write that down. Normally what you would have in these cases, if you have a control that requires something to be turned on, is you would have like an extra button here, right? Like if you go into Serum, it's really clear before you can actually filter something that you have to turn on the filter. And in this case I would like to see the same thing here, where you have this FM filter thing here. You would be able to add just a little toggle button, small little circle here where you just can turn it on or off, instead of having to go to here, see that there is an FM filter thing on, or an FM filter button here which you have to click. You can still have all these settings here. It would just be handy for like quick sound design and getting to know the actual plugin to be able to turn it on from this point. And it's kind of now that I know it, it kind of makes sense. Like, okay, anytime you press a button, you have to check the settings here to see what you're doing. So maybe that allows us to make sense of this thing here. Right, let's try get a nice little sine wave again. And if we now turn up surface thing, you can hear that there is definitely something going on, like a modulation. And but we still don't know what it is. Maybe it would be nice for things like these, where the surface thing, it just tells you what it's actually doing. Like maybe it's adding some noise, maybe it's detuning it a little bit, stuff like that. So I would say here explain and menu, right? Like having an actual description of what each button is doing, especially for these surface things, saying what it is doing, because I don't know. And having a tool with buttons which you don't know what they do means that you're less likely to actually use them to its fullest potential. Like I wouldn't use this, I would just detune stuff if I want to get a detuned feeling. So yeah, all these kind of things have their own little thing. You can set the phase of two things to get a nice stereo effect, which is really useful. What I thought this would do is actually set the phase of the whole thing, but maybe if we change this, this allows you to add a mono signal to it. You can have one stereo and two mono, which doesn't really make sense. You can have a mono, and now this thing doesn't make sense because it's not actually messing with that thing. Maybe it is doing what it's showing up here, but it's not sounding like it. So the graph doesn't always display the actual thing it's doing to the waveform, which is weird. We're also able to invert the phase here, which is really cool. I don't know if there's a way to re-trigger it. Maybe here, phase depth allows you to set the depth of each thing, I think. Again, this doesn't show up in the graph, which would be really useful. Also, as you can see, sometimes the buttons feel kind of wonky. Like you have to drag up and down, where normally you would also be able to drag left and right to change the value, which is not the case here. Right, it doesn't feel natural going this way and the button not actually working. You actually have to drag down and up. Also, if you hold control, you get finer adjustments, right, as opposed to this. You can see now I'm moving it almost all the way, and now with the same amount of movement I'm just moving it a little bit, which is really cool. That's generally a useful feature. So I kind of wanted to get into the shape, see what that does and what it sounds like. We have three options. We have a digital, normal and rectifier here, and it has this more function which goes from, I assume that is percentages, as well as a merge version. And oh, we have a submenu here, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe you want to put like a box around it, like anything that is a menu like this or this has a box around it. Maybe you want it to have that here too. So you would probably turn these two things on. Do we have a simple sine wave? I think we do. Let's see what that sounds like if I turn it up. So this is the rectifier one. It allows you to just change things a little bit. This almost feels like a coloring knob, which is really useful. You see how this button does actually work side to side? Probably doesn't. Yeah, no, this doesn't go up and down. This only works side to side. So normally every button would go up and down and every button would go side to side altogether. I've actually made a plugin before, so I kind of know how this works. I think I might be able to open it and kind of show you. Yeah, so this is the thing I made, which is pretty stupid and not useful at all. But what this particular plugin does, and most plugins do, is they check the amount of diagonal movement. So either by moving up or down, you're kind of going away from that point, but also sideways. And any movement in, like, imagine, how can I explain? Imagine an x and a y value. It takes both positive x and positive y values as going up, and negative x and negative y values. So you can actually keep it at the same place. Like, let's say we do this. If you really train enough, you can keep it at the same place by going down and to the right, or left and up, right? So they cancel each other out. So you're checking the movement in this direction, the diagonal, and you check both if it's going up or going to the right for turning it up, or either the other way around for turning it down. This version has two different versions. This checks for only horizontal movement, and this checks for only vertical movement, which is not really intuitive. So I'm gonna write that down. Okay, now that we have this out of the way, we have the mod oscillator out of the way. It seems like a very versatile oscillator. We have some different things here. We have pulse width modulation, which for some reason doesn't seem to do anything. Maybe that has PWW stereo. Maybe it has to be a pulse wave. Yeah, so again, sometimes this doesn't work. Maybe you want to like black out the knob if it's on a wave that wouldn't work. Let's say on a sine wave. If both were sine waves and you know it doesn't work on the sine wave, you just gray out this knob and the value so people don't say, oh, this knob is not doing anything, I'm never gonna touch it again, and therefore miss out on nice features. Okay, so that's the first oscillator. He said it has 3 powerful oscillators, but what I think happens is you can only use one at a time. If you're just running it like this, there is a way to like have multiple oscillators. You can have 1 and 2, 1 and 3, all oscillators, and I don't know how it works. So you can turn multi-mode on here. So now we have 1. Let's set FM to this thing. And we can go to the ROM and kind of change to a different wave, let's say this plug thing. And if I now go to multi, I can maybe turn it up by you can hear it, but I would like to have a mixer somewhere so I can turn up what's going on here. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Oh, you can send different MIDI files to different parts of the synth, which is really cool. Allows you to play multiple things. We have velocity range and note range for each oscillator here. You can set on and off effects. I don't know what this button does. Maybe this is the volume. Oh, that's panning. Maybe this is volume. If I turn this down, yeah, you get a nice mixer here. Doesn't really tell you a lot. There are no like values in here. You can't really check how many decibels you're turning down your thing, which sometimes can be a good thing. Maybe sometimes people focus a little bit too much on like numbers in their sounds, and this is a way to kind of change that a little bit. But that's like a philosophy you want to have throughout your whole synth. And here, for example, when you're filtering, you can see the cutoff. The way another plugin handles that, which is Silent or Spire, sorry, that actually just has generic values for everything. And here we have generic values for some things, and for other things we have precise values. Maybe that's kind of cool to have some places where you can dial down and really get with the values. Like in a filter, it's kind of important where it is in terms of like in relation to your harmonic series and everything like that. So maybe this is the right way, and I'm currently just bitching about a little bit. But I think it's a really cool and intuitive mixer thing here. You can make things mono, you can have the side signal only, so you can have one oscillator that's doing the side, and you can have another oscillator doing the mono thing. Of course, then we need to make sure that there's a little bit of detune maybe. That's kind of cool, very useful. Something I noticed is that it's very annoying that these buttons make sounds. There's a few other things that make sounds when you click on them throughout the plugin, which is slightly annoying, but I think I can get over that once you start actually working a lot with it. Let's do some filtering. Let's see if we can make a nice little pluggy sound here. I have a low pass here. Now I want to send the other oscillator also to the filter. Is there a way I can do that or see why it shouldn't be working? Oh, okay. So each oscillator has its own filter. Is there a master filter somewhere which I can use? Yeah. How do I turn this on? Okay, filter on. And let's say I want the low pass 24 dB. Now I'm gonna click amount here and we have ADSR 2. We're gonna put that at effects. Okay, so now I'm targeting these effects. I want to target these things, the master effects. Is that possible? Is that even what I'm doing right now? Can you target the master effects here? Here are some other things. It doesn't really show you where you can do that. What I do find cool is that they have 2 pages here with routing things, so you can kind of look at 2 ADSRs at the same time by just switching between these 2 and see what's going on there. Instead, what we have to do, let's say we're going to put ADSR 1 to the cutoff of 1, and we're going to turn up the amount, and we're also going to put this to that cutoff, so we should have 2 oscillators with the same thing here. Now let's set this to 220, turn on the filter. Filter multi-filter 24 dB. We'll turn this on and we'll go to this and set this to the same amount. Now we have to turn up the decay. And of course we have to turn this. I'm gonna turn this one off. That's kind of weird. It almost feels like even though we dial in a release, it's still snapping to the lowest value, not finishing the... Okay, maybe well, the decay was too short. That kind of works. Now let's dial down the FM a little bit here and turn this up nicely. So yeah, let's say we like that bass sound. Again, this whole thing comes with a lot of effects. I think each oscillator has its own effect section. Let's turn this mix down and check. No, the effects are all together. So only the filters and the oscillators change for each one, right? As you can see, there's a little bit of a change here. This has a little lower cutoff than this one, but envelopes stay the same, master stays the same, which is all what you would expect, and also the effects and the modulation stays the same, I think. Maybe not. Let's quickly check that. Yeah, that all works. So only filters and oscillators are for each page, which is good to know. Now let's go into some effects. Again, this could use just a normal button where you would click on it and it would just toggle between the two things. It's kind of annoying having to press each thing twice. You can't really hear what's going on even because we have all the popping noises, but I think these effects are very, maybe not very good, but decent enough for being part of €1 synthesizer. We have an amp simulator, we have a bit reducer, which for some reason turned off. Ah, wait a second. What I thought was happening was that just by choosing this, we would turn off something else, but it turns out you can just turn on everything, which is really powerful. So I can have 14 different effects here. We can have a vowel filter, for example, which has a really cool visual thing where it kind of shows you what it would sound like if a human tried to do it. So with the mouth, it kind of shows you. It also has this gender thing, which makes a human rotate and smaller and bigger, and it kind of changes the head, which is kind of weird. I guess that's okay. Let's turn, yeah, this is on. Let's see what that comes with. A little tone. We have a mix, a dry color, which just a little bit of a filter thing, kind of turns on the high end. Yeah, it's the thing, it's T-posing, rotating and blowing up his head. It's kind of weird. I don't know what they are trying to convey here. I'm not seeing a change in gender. I just see men rotating. We also have a sidechainer, which is really cool, I think. I think this is kind of like a kickstart thing. Even though it's kind of weird because it starts at 1/8, which is an odd time signature to sidechain. Let's see if we can actually hear it by playing it, maybe. I'm quickly going to put down an actual MIDI clip here that's the right length. It's a little bit loud, isn't it? Is there a way to... It sounds kind of weird. Maybe I want to turn it down a bit so we can actually... It feels like... I don't know, you can hear that there is some sidechaining going on, but I don't know exactly how it's working and why some things are sounding like they're sidechained, but there's also like a part coming through, even though the amount is all the way up. Like, what does that mean? I wanted to actually duck and go down. Maybe I just don't understand it yet here. So let's turn this off for now. I'd like to see the high filter, what this is. It sounds like a very narrow resonant filter. As you can see, the resonance is all the way up, so maybe you want to turn it down a bit. Sounds like almost like a little bit of a low pass. As you can see, it's set to low pass. You can set it to band pass. I don't know what that does. Like, why would you need another filter here? What's so special about this one? You can set the spread, which is kind of cool. I'd love to see how you could use this in actual sound design. Once this whole plugin just kind of gets better at performance and stuff like that, because it's very laggy to work with it. And my workflow is definitely not on point at this point, but I'd love to see some upgrades to the speed, and also the popping noise is just annoying. It seems to happen a lot more on higher volumes. Like if we go to the amp, turn everything up, right? Make it as loud as possible. Let's go to the amp sim. That's on. Now it's a bit louder. You can't really hear it, but you can. There's definitely more pops going on when we're at a higher volume. So that's the effects. We can check the delay and the reverb. Definitely sound nice. We're again suffering from the same issues where we just hear some random pops going on, so you can't really judge it, but it feels like a nice little room. The controls are kind of weird. They look really cool. The reverb, is this the amount or the length, or what is this? It almost feels like both a dry wet knob and some other controls for the reverb. So maybe it's like one control that does not, or that does control a few parameters of an actual reverb. So this will turn up the delay a little bit together with the size. You can change the size of the room. So this is a very short size. And by turning it up you get a really long delay reverb tail, which is really good. I think having extreme controls like that really helps with sound design. Like let's say I want to make a long impact, I can do that by just this reverb, turning it up, and you get this nice sound. And then later I can go in and make my own tail. So that's pretty cool. We have stereo width here, which again, the visuals for this thing are just amazing. They kind of aren't really 100% showing exactly what's going on with your sound, like for example Serum does. When you go into the filter, you have this neat little visualizer of the actual filter. It shows you how high the resonance is, and it shows you a little spike, and it shows what the fatness knob does and what the drive knob does, even though they kind of look like they do the same thing. I believe the fatness adds a slight boost around your resonance thing, and you have this neat little phaser or phases thing where it shows you what it's doing to the phase. This is a bit more generic, I would say. It doesn't really show you exactly what's going on to your sound. For example, as I said here, we have this shape. This isn't the actual shape that's gonna go into your wave. It's just a generic way of showing what might happen to your sound. And that's kind of cool. I think that helps being more creative, allowing you to, instead of focusing on the visuals, it allows you to focus on the sound itself. And it really helps sometimes in sound designs to be exact, but sometimes you just want to mess around. Helps with the buttons. Just click random buttons, add random values to the thing, and this is a good way to do that. The visuals don't enforce you to think of your sound in technical terms. So it kind of shows not all the things. For example, these don't have a visual aid. Maybe it would be cool for this to have the same visual aid as if you go, there was a way to kind of show the filter you were having. Maybe it was if you use the bandpass filter. yeah, maybe it would be cool to have the same visualizer for the low pass on this one than you have with this thing, where it kind of shows you the filter here and the resonance spike here. So there are a few things that could use an extra little bit of visualizer. There's also detune function here, which sounds kind of weird. Again, here the same knob issue where just turning it up and down with all the other ones works, but not with this one. So you kind of need to get used to this. Let's see what this detune function does. Let's turn up our size a bit, our width. It's almost like it's modulating the pitch of the sound, which is a fairly cool effect actually. Gives you this nice little up and down sweeps. So yeah, that's the thing. Let's go through all the other the delay a little bit. We have again high pass, low pass filter. We have this blur knob, which I don't know what it does. You have simple timing. You can choose between full timing, triplets, and dotted notes here. Simple feedback, which has this neat little visual where it just shows kind of the wrong thing. I would say this is more of a visual bit for timing. I would show this as timing, and I would just like fade them out and in for a feedback, because that's what it does. It kind of cycles, decides how much of the signal is gonna go and be delayed again. And finally we have this delay here, the dry wet almost, which again has a cool visual. This actually makes a lot of sense because it's just like the volume of each delayed signal, and it very much shows you how the delay is kind of fading out. You could use this, for example, this same visual, and just turn up all the other ones. Can't actually point to with it with the mouse because then we'll lose the thing, but let's say this turns up all the things, and then with feedback you would just have more and less of those little boxes. So that could be a little bit of a visual design which you could use, but still not anything. I would say it's just very small little changes here. Here we have something which I don't understand. We have some modulation here. Again, I don't have a manual for this thing. There is a modulation source here and a timing, and this is your amount, and you can set a destination. Let's say destination A is cutoff 1 right here. Let's set the amount and then a multiply. Okay, so this multiplies the speed of the wave, I think. Let's see what this does. As you can see, weird visuals going on here. At slower speeds it kind of makes sense. It kind of shows you what's going on. Let's say to a sign, you can actually see it's slowly lighting up and going down again. If we set it to a saw wave, you can see it lights up and then goes down all the way. You can set the phase, which actually doesn't show up in this thing, which is kind of strange, but I guess you could get used to that. So what does this actually do? Is this just an LFO? Yeah, LFO 1 here. We seem to have this being the amount of modulation it does to A, and we have an amount B here which would do the modulation to B. So let's put this at the first cutoff for mod B. Let's set this down a little bit and turn this all the way up and see what that does. Oh, I'm quickly gonna turn all these things off. can hear that we indeed have modulation there. If I turn this all the way down, we should just have the modulation of the LFO then. And if I go here, we have so this output amount does both things here, and this amount is the amount A, and I think this will be, yeah, you can hear this is basically amount 1 is amount or for destination A, and then we have amount B for destination B. So yeah, that's very confusing. And then we have this retrigger mode, velocity trigger, which allows you to set one oscillator to. I think what this allows you to do is allows you to because you can set different MIDIs, right? You can set a MIDI setting for each one of them. If you go here, you can have multiple MIDI channels going in. So what I think this will do is allows you to, if I go here, select a MIDI channel, either 1, 2, 3, or all of them, and then allows you to set a velocity, and if it hits a note with that velocity, it will re-trigger the LFO, which is fairly cool. That's actually a really cool way to do it. I don't think there is a way, for example in Serum, to individually re-trigger an oscillator without having to play a new note. You have to, which means that all your envelopes get played again, and it will start from the new phase where you started it from, except instead of keep looping the same sound again. So that's actually really cool. That's actually probably really powerful once you actually dive into it and start setting up your MIDI that way. But I'm kind of confused why we have this multiplier here. So we have this normal one, right? It would normally be set to 1, I think. So at this point the timing is the same. Why not just have a time slider where you can set a start point and allow you to modulate that? Because now we have 2 buttons we need to keep in mind to actually do timing. And this is confusing because you now cannot modulate to a different timing without being very precise. Like let's say I do it twice. Is this now gonna be 1/8? Okay, so the actual value here is used for the multiplication, so that kind of makes sense. So if I set it to 4, you are going to have 1/16 note if you set the timing to this, and that kind of allows you to morph between them, which is a decent way of doing it. I don't think that's the worst. It's just something you need to get used to. For example, again in Serum you just have a timing knob which you can change and just move between different timing sections, but this way you can kind of stay in between if you want, right? You can kind of go between very fast modulation and very slow, so it's their way of handling unsynced modulation almost, like where you can just enter a Hertz value. So instead of doing that, you can just enter a weird multiplication value. Let's say you add 0.7. That's just gonna basically be a weird time value. A weird time value you're never actually gonna use. So it's a bit confusing, but once you start getting used to it, I think it could be a really cool way of doing morphing between time values. I'd definitely say that's a pretty cool feature. Finally, again, we have this there is a way to kind of check all the modulation. My first complaint with this whole thing was that there is no way to actually check all the modulation things. But if you click on the matrix here, and you can actually see all the modulation sources, and then you can browse through them, and you should be able to see all the modulation going on. For some reason nothing is showing up for this thing though. So if I go here, this destination A and B aren't showing up if I go in here. Okay, so no, then there is no way to see all the modulations. Okay. So how does this work then? Does this allow me to use this as more modulation? Like, can I set this to the pitch 2 and then this will stay? Okay, so in total you have 7 destinations where you can send any LFO to. And you can easily just sync these two up. You can change this to a saw, you can set the timing the same, set the amount the same, as well as the multiplication, and now you have 14 places where you could theoretically send an LFO to, and all have to modulate the exact same or different things, and both being the same. You can have 14 modulation sources for one massive LFO, which consists out of 2 if you want to. So that's pretty cool. You can set this to, let's set this to wave mix, for example, and we'll set this to cutoff. I'm gonna set it to some effects. You can even self-modulate, so LFO1 can change the multiplication of LFO2, which at the moment isn't really showing up, I suppose. And then we have to set amounts, maybe. Now you can see that they're out of sync, I think. You can see that this one is sometimes going a little bit faster and a little bit slower than the other one. So now I think it is working. But you cannot set individual amounts for each one of them. Let's say I want to modulate the pitch slightly, but I want to modulate this LFO multiplier by a lot. How would you be able to do that? Is there a way to do that? Maybe if you set LFO1 to B and just turn up B and we turn down this one. But then we pretty much lost all our modulation things. So I'm gonna turn off the pitch here, set this to none. And if I then go to B, I can set pitch instead. And if we turn this almost all the way down and this up, yeah, we get this is modulating all the way, and destination A is modulating just a little bit. Which, I mean, that's a nice compromise. You can just set up 2 different sources or 2 different things with the same source. It's kind of weird that this says LFO1 output and this just says LFO1. Doesn't really make sense. Also here you can browse the different waves, which is kind of cool. What might be cool is to have again buttons here which allows you to click forward and backward to go through all of these things. Instead of having 2 different menus pop up, you just have one that does the buttons, which scrolls through all of these options, and that shows you up, and then once you click in the middle between the arrows, it will actually open up the menu of all the possible things you can modulate there. I think that will be a little bit cleaner. And all those little things, like maybe have buttons here which allows you to quickly switch between modulation sources. Again, arrows would do probably fine. You could have arrows on this thing, for example, which allows you to quickly switch between the settings of each effect here, and the same for this thing, because here is another array of different effects. You have the stereo image, which is a really cool feature. Just adds a little bit of whiteness and you can turn it all down. And you can kind of switch between you can set the side volume. Right, so this introduces more stereo, and then you can mix between mid and side things. We have a master filter here, which you can use the cutoff for, and you have all these options which show up for that. We have a limiter, which you can turn on. You have pre-gain and post-gain, which should be enough to set basic limiter settings. What might be cool is to have a release control somewhere for that. Like this screen is not really that full, you could have another button on here to set release controls. We have layer effects, which I don't know what that does. Maybe it's a dry wet for each effect here. So let's turn on some effects. If we turn on delay and reverb, does this turn down? No. Layer effects on. Oh. So what is layer effects then? Is this like a noise oscillator? What a weird place for a noise oscillator. Why is this here? What is going on here? Where can I see? Oh, this is allows you to add stuff. Factory ROMs. Is this where we have the voice which says virtual hybrid synthesizer thing? It allows you to pitch thing. So you can just add another sampler to that and you can quickly change the pitch of that. That's a weird place to put it. I would have put this thing next to or as part of the oscillator list. Just another oscillator. It doesn't make any sense. Why is this here? Like you have, yeah, this is just what? And now I'm curious if this is the place where the thing comes from. When you type in I am Genesis, right? The startup sound. Is this where the actual voice comes from? Can I check? Wait, maybe we have to open it again for it to actually work. Let's write down. Layer effects make no sense. Is this then where, if I go here, no, this isn't the actual sound either. Then where does the sound come from in this case? Main oscillator off, multi oscillator. This is making a piano one. Right? because here there are buttons, but for some reason I cannot actually click them, which is kind of weird. Maybe that shows what is being used inside the patch, like we're using delay, we're using the LFO1 to do stuff, but still it would be cool if you could just click on them and go to their options. So what were we talking about? Let's initialize the preset again, because I don't want to work with that sound. Also, what I've noticed, there is this, well, I wouldn't consider it really cool. It's a different feature. There is this connecting to Genesis mainframe, and it kind of shows you messages from their thing. And once you clear the messages, there's an XP thing. While you use Genesis Pros, you gradually earn experience points. You can use these points to play the Genesis code and unlock extra content. The only problem is I've seen my experience at 14, I've seen it go down again, back to like 0, and I don't know why, what's going on. Like if I just tweak a knob for long enough, can I just farm experience like this? Like let's say I start randomly tweaking knobs, does that, or is it like how long I've opened the plugin for? Like if I go back now, yeah, that didn't change anything, but if we just sit here, will it just automatically farm experience? It does actually look like I have to do stuff, which is kind of weird. Maybe it's because I've seen it go down. Like if I open up a new version of Genesis, it just goes down again. That's why what I don't get, like where is it going then? Do I just have to have it open? Or maybe okay, so I don't have enough experience to do anything. Apparently clicking this did something. Or maybe it's just the time. I don't know what it does. It is kind of a cool concept of having, like, by using the plugin, you gain like this almost virtual currency, and you can then use it to like buy sounds instead of actually having to pay for them. That's kind of cool. But it's just unclear how you actually gain this. Because I was at 14 and now I'm back to 11 and we were back at 9, so I don't know how that works. What are some other things we didn't look at? There is one thing that's pretty cool. We have this thing here which just generates a random setting for you on the oscillator, and now we generated a soft tone. So sometimes I have to click here to actually be able to send MIDI there. And now we generate a hard tone that will generate a little bit cooler. If you want, if you make a shitty sound, then deduct XP. Yeah, that would, yeah, but how, yeah, no, I don't know how that would work. So there's this thing, right? The Xgen tone generator menu thing, which allows you to generate random values for things here. For soft tones, for a hard tone. And they also have a plugged version here, which also randomizes the filter and ADSR, which is pretty cool. You can quickly generate plugs here. And there's also, I don't know what this does. There's this thing, run template. So you can, So they have these templates here which you can run, and it will automatically set up like modulation and stuff for you. It would be cool if they actually show you what they're doing, because I don't really know what's going on right now. So we're running this template, right? They even have it for this thing, which is a chord generator. So if I run this thing, I'm gonna turn this down a bit. I want to go back to main, XGen, second thing. They have this chord simulator, which is pretty cool. There was another thing where you could go and turn on a chord mode for an oscillator. I don't know where that is. Yeah, but you have this general key thing. Oh, here, this is it. You can turn up an extra layer, I think, by going up to this thing. Let's quickly initialize the preset and check that. This will do. So if I turn this up, and then you can turn this thing to quickly make chord things, which is pretty cool. And you can transpose the whole thing down by one key, or you can transpose them up in octaves. So this is general key settings. You have a mono mode, and we have a legato here. You can add portamento, and either normal or slide. I don't know what the difference is. Maybe this is like the always function. Yeah, even if you release a note, it will still slide, and this just... That's only when you press 2 or more notes at the same time. We also have this glissando, which is... Maybe this is the same way as the scale version in Serum here. This one, which depending on how far the notes apart are, it takes longer or shorter to actually execute the slide, I think. Let's check that. Let's turn this on. And if we turn this off, that seems to be the same length. I don't know what that does. There's an auto strummer here. Let's turn this on, see what that does. Kind of quickly goes between notes, which is kind of cool. Third page, auto slide settings. So yeah, more stuff you can turn on and off slides for different oscillators, I think. And also the layer effects, which is this one, which is pretty cool. Oh, so it automatically already slides it up even if you just play one note, right? Like, kind of makes it slide up, which is pretty cool. And oh, I wanted to go to page 4. Oh, we have note and velocity settings here. We can set ranges. You can just allow it to turn it off, and maybe have multiple versions of Genesis Pro running on one single track, and by doing this you can have the lower notes play a different instance of the plugin than the higher notes, or even just through velocity range. right? You can turn this one down. This is a slightly annoying thing where the mouse and the arrow don't line up. It's highly confusing. So that's another small thing they would need to work out, in my opinion. Here we have the general. You can adjust tuning, you can adjust the pitch band, goes up to 3 octaves, which is 1 octave more than Serum. You have polyphonic settings, voice stealing, which I don't know what it does. We have quality of the ROM oscillator here. Output color, so you can do extra boosting. I think it just applies an EQ to the whole thing, maybe some saturation. Menu sound, oh, you can turn that off. Okay, that's cool. So now if I click this stuff, no more sound, which is pretty awesome. It's a weird place to put it, I think. And I don't know if it saves this as an option. Maybe you want to have this as an option maybe here. So that's a thing. You can set the velocity amplifier and the filter, which is really useful. That works the same way as going to Serum and assigning this as a mod value to either your filter or your volume here, and then setting the settings from there. This would be the amount. And same for this thing. The only difference being that in Serum you can go both ways, which is usually not needed. Normally higher velocity means filter more open, so this will do just fine, will do the trick. You can set the envelope response to different modes, which I don't know what the difference between these are. Probably just the way they kind of release out and the attack comes in. But that's really cool that you can kind of dive deep into it if you really want to. So yeah, the last thing we kind of need to explore is the ROM oscillator and the multi-wave oscillator. We haven't really gone deep into that thing. So that's something I want to do. Just mainly for myself actually. And then I want to design some actual sounds with this. See if we can make it do some sidetrans bass lines, sidetrans lead sounds maybe. I want to see how well it works with my workflow. How fast I can make basic squelch sound, basic sidetrans bass with this, and how well I can make them sound. I will take a little break though, and I'm gonna put up a new song from the EP, which is coming out the 28th. We're gonna throw down a little song here. If I go to my desktop EP, I think you already heard the first one. Yesterday I put up the second one, but I think I'm gonna do it again because I don't know if you were there, and I would love to hear what you think about this song. Ableton has this weird thing where it kind of cuts off the start and the end of big files, so we have to drag it off like that. I'm going to loop this thing and solo it and take a little break. All right, I'm back. Oh, I want to turn this off now. Let's get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. Let's finally dive into some of the last things, if it allows me to. Yeah. Again, as I said, having Genesis Pro open in your project is gonna come with some performance issues at the moment. They're working on that, and we should probably expect an update to like these main performance issues and the clicking noise again in the coming week or the week after that. Maybe it's already up. Let's quickly check on the Twitter account of Umet Oskan. Maybe he has said something about this. Quickly. No update so far. As I showed before, the last update we got is that they're currently having trouble with the JBridge version. I saw somewhere else that they were actually I got an email that they're not going to be releasing a 64-bit version of it, and that they will instead force users to use JBridge, which I have used for this one, and they're also prioritizing the audio issues and the CPU load, and then they will start taking user feedback for any upcoming changes that they might implement. So the final two things I wanted to do is wanted to dive deeper into the ROM oscillator and the multi-wave oscillator, and then we'll do some actual sound design from scratch. So that's, I think I did initialize. Let's initialize this thing again so we're sure. And we're gonna go instead to the ROM oscillator, which means we have this piano A sound here. And you have all these custom ROMs here, which might use the same as this layer effect. I'm not sure. Go to layer effects here and turn this on. Where is it? There was also a thing you could choose from here, right? No, they have even more options in here. You can go in here, and I think this might be this. Yeah, part of them are the same option here. You can go in here and choose different ROM settings for your ROM oscillator, and then in layer effects you have even more options, which are from these things. You have this, for example, deep space. You can set it to the pitch. So let's turn this off for now and focus on the ROM oscillator. So instead of your first wave being an actual waveform, you can use a sample. I don't think you can insert custom ROMs. Maybe you can. I don't know where you would do that, but there is these custom ROM features here, which seem to be empty right now. So there might be a way to actually import your own waveforms into this, which would be really powerful. And you can change between, again, the wave here. This turns off the second wave, but this does not seem to be turning off the first. Maybe it has to. Okay, so you can FM the second wave with the first wave if you do it like this, and if you do the second wave, FM doesn't do anything. So it's going to go from the first wave to the second. It would be cool if there was an option to change that around, where you could FM a sample with a small or with a basic waveform. instead of the other way around. Right? I think it would be much more useful if you could do that the other way around. Maybe there is an option for that. If I go to here, maybe this is the thing I'm looking for. If I go... No. This doesn't change anything. It's still the same way around. I don't know what the difference is between this and this. Maybe it's flipping the polarity of one of the waves before doing the FM thing. There's a rephase option. This is all the same as the other one. The main difference between these two is that you have a sample as your first wave instead of a waveform. So that's pretty cool. I don't see any strange options. Maybe some cool things is... Okay, so you can do pulse width modulation on a wave. That would be really cool. Again, this doesn't do anything. You can detune them, so it will create a few copies of them. There's a voice separation thing here. There's a mono unison, which for some reason still feels very stereo to me. The whole thing feels stereo. Maybe it's the... Okay, so you need to turn the image down and then maybe with the tuning on. Maybe it has to do with this being... Maybe you have to put this in the middle. Okay, so this still is stereo. So that's a bit of a weird option then to me. Why isn't this making the sound mono? And how can I make it mono if I want to? Maybe this has to be at 1 to be not affecting it at all. Let's see. Doesn't seem to change anything. Okay, so I don't know what that does then. Let's just ignore it. Gonna turn this off. We have the same surface thing, which just adds a little bit of grit to the whole thing. Again, I don't really know how this works. It would be useful to have a little description of what it actually is doing to the sound. You can go very extreme with it. Or you can just add a little bit of this thing to it. And there's also this raw setting, which I think sits somewhere in the middle. But that's cool enough to kind of change the whole thing. I don't know, I want to kind of check if there's any weird stuff going on if we go very low or high in pitch. It still seems to do unison stuff, maybe. Let's quickly turn up the volume a bit. Let's put this to 0 so we can... That don't seem to be as many artifacts as inside a sampler like Nexus. Nexus is very known for having much aliasing when you really turn down or up a pitch beyond what the original sound source was designed for. Like, let's say you open up a lead sound in Nexus, which is a sampler, right? If you play it at a bass register, you can really hear some aliasing at that point, but this seems to not have that problem. which again is really good. Means that you can use sounds that are made for a lead and use them as a bass sound almost. Now we're actually below the sub register, and you can still hear that we're actually doing fine with no weird smearing going on in the high end. Here the smearing just comes from the actual sample having a lot of high-end weirdness going on, and it doesn't have to do with the actual plugin. Like if you play this at its register where it needs to be played, you can hear that it's still the same thing, right? So that's cool. So replaces the first waveform with a sample. You have a good amount of stuff to choose from, I think. Here we're at ROM number 2. We have bass, combi, flute, all these kinds of string elements. You have a real brass sound here. They all sound pretty cool. We have some vocal stuff going on, so you could use this to make like a vocal synth. Very EDM kind of stuff, you know, your Melbourne bounce synth lead, which uses a voice to kind of go through distortion and some filtering to make this that lead sound, which you hear in Melbourne bounce a lot. And let's see, is there any other cool stuff? Bell sounds, nice little pluck. You have some percussions. Again, fine-tuning this, it would be really cool to just have arrows, so you would be able to quickly browse between different sounds from a sound set. Again, a lot of percussions here actually. Nice little percussion there. And then this last one seems to be a drum kit, which is pretty cool. You have another drum kit here, a few different hi-hats, more hi-hats, shaker here, some different claps. I suspect there will be some kicks in here. Yeah. So that's nice. Actually, now that I think of it, here we have arrows. I wonder if there's a difference between these arrows and the previous and next thing. Like if I go to this thing, will the previous be... Okay, so the arrows and the next button is the same thing. It would be really, really powerful if you were able to use one of them. Let's say I go to a different ROM. If the previous was actually going to the previous sound you listened, so maybe in a different ROM, or if I go here and hit the previous, it would go back to the very first one, because that's the last one I listened, and instead the arrows would just go to the next one and the previous one in the sound, or in the actual thing. So let's say I am here. If I press this button, it would go to the last one, and instead if I go to previous, it would go to the last one I selected. So in this case that would be a Vox. I think that would be a cool feature. Now you just have two buttons that do the same thing, which is kind of, I don't know, kind of useless. So I'm gonna write that down. Arrow okay, arrow and button do different things in ROM oscillator is something I would say. But other than that, very powerful feature here. Really cool that they added that option instead of just having basic waves. We also have this multi-wave oscillator, which has different features, and we're gonna see how that works. So you're able to select from these very simple waves here. I don't know why this is still showing the other one. I clearly went to this thing. I want to have the... Okay, so but I think this... Why is this... I don't know why this is still showing it from the other oscillator. Like if I go here, maybe I have to actually press a button for it to update, which would be really... This could just update if I select a different thing, right? Like instead of having to go to this thing, you could make it automatically switch if you switch oscillator. That's the thing I need to remember. So I'm gonna write that down. Okay. Let's try some stuff out. I'm gonna select 4 different waveforms, and now we should be able to... let's click this. We have a saw wave, a ramp wave, a triangle, and a sine wave. We can tune them differently if we want to. Let's try this. And we can set this even lower. If I turn this up 1, we should still have a sub then. You can hear we have this sub engaged. Right? So this is a cool way to make supersaws. We also have FM for the 3. And that just takes the last one as an FM source. Which is strange. There should be probably a way to kind of change that, allow you to set up custom routings for that. Might be cool. There's a phase thing, which I don't know what that does, how that changes anything. It also comes standard with a detune, and you can set these to re-trigger. Okay, so when you start re-triggering stuff, that's when it actually makes sense to change this thing, right? Now it's not doing anything because they're free to run, so the phase button is not going to do anything. So maybe in this case, again, just if you use the oscillator free, just gray out this thing because it's not doing anything. And once you turn it to actual re-trigger mode, it lights up the phase thing, and you are able to do your phase here. So that's kind of cool. Let's go through the main settings here, because I'm kind of curious. The first thing I would like to see, is there a mixer? A mixer here. There's this auto chord feature, which is pretty cool. Allows you to quickly write down chords. There are a few options here. You have this low, mid, high, and wide thing, which makes a wider chord, and we have this mid. So it's a bit lower. You have to turn up your actual MIDI to make it work. It almost feels like a transposing feature. Just squashes it a little bit more together, but you constantly need to keep transposing it if you want to stay in the same register, which is kind of annoying, but something you kind of might get used to. I think this is once you have set it up and made the decision here, you don't want to go in and change it too much. There's also split mode, which I don't know what it does. Okay, so what this does, if I understand it right, there is it splits between having it on and off depending on which key you press. So in upper mode you can have the lowest notes play a normal thing, and then higher notes actually play chords. And if I go into the MIDI, we can quickly see where exactly the crossing point is. So between E3, here it plays a chord, and then one lower, it just plays one note. I don't know how you can set the exact crossing point. It would be cool if you were able to. You can change it between this makes the lower notes play single notes and the upper notes play chords, and this is the other way around. I don't know if there's a way to set which notes exactly become the crossover point. That would be really useful. That way you can determine exactly where you want your, maybe you are writing a sound, for example, you want your low note here. Let's say you want to do something like this, right? Simple, let's set it to an EDM-ish tempo. You want to set a simple EDM feeling sound. So you would play something like this. Let's quickly make this long enough. And we're gonna write a nice EDM progression, very simple. I think will work like this. Maybe you want this one to go up a little bit. Maybe one more, just to get an idea. Right, that works as a progression, just a very simple one. Now what you can do is you can turn this up. But if I turn this one down, you can hear probably the first note is going to be chords and the rest will be single notes. Right, you can really hear the difference there, that this is playing chords and the rest is going to be playing notes. So an option to change where the crossover point would be really useful, and I don't know where this is. I cannot seem to find it. Okay, so these arrows switch between pages, which is a really good thing. Again, having an option where you can change that would be really useful. Then we have this spread voices thing. I think we saw most of this. This also also sits in here. If you go here, you can see we have the same options, I think, or at least almost the same options. You have some weird things in here. If I go here, you instead have these lower things. We have a detune mode, which maybe that has to do when I turn on detune. Yeah, you can hear this is slightly detuned, and you can turn it up to extreme. And there is also a wide option, and then a normal one. There's this mono priority, which I don't know what it does. You can stack layer A to create like these chord things, which is pretty decent. You can turn off different oscillators. So let's say I only want oscillator 1 to play. Now we only have this one playing. We can change it to oscillator 2, which is that ramp, or we can do both, and that also works for B. right? This should be okay. So I think what happens here is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think because number 2 seems to be, if we put this to sine and we don't play this, you can hear that's a sine wave, and this is our saw wave. Now if I put this to triangle, we can hear number 3 is going to be a triangle. Nice little retro gaming sound here. And number 4 should also be a sine wave. So it might be cool to have numbers here, to have these numbers so you know which one is which, because I assumed at start that this is going to be 1, then this would be 2, this would be 3, and this would be 4. Because these are kind of grouped together, and so are these. And we have these groups here, right? You have your oscillator A and oscillator B. And I really don't know why they're in oscillator A and B. What I would much prefer is if there was another page which would just be a mixer tab between the 4 oscillators. I think that would be much more useful. Just like we have here, I think there was a either in a multi one. Yeah, something like this, but for your multi-wave oscillator, allowing you to change the different oscillators of different things would be really cool. I think that would be a much more powerful feature. Finally, we have this morph thing, and I think this works in every oscillator. Maybe not. Okay, so this is only for the multi-wave oscillator. This allows you to morph LFO1 mod around and morph off. What does this mean? I don't know what that does. Let's turn this off maybe. Okay, so this is a thing I don't understand. So yeah, you can turn the main oscillator off, and then you can use it as a sampler through this FX layer, right? You can turn this on, get some nice textures out of it if you want to, or not. That's pretty much the whole thing. It comes with, last thing we wanted to go over, it comes with a step sequencer. You have a few different things here. Nice little. Now we're playing this A Vox here. You can set the amount of steps. And you can turn on velocity mode, I think. What is this then? Okay, that doesn't seem to. There seem to be 3 different things. You also have an ARP here. I'm gonna go. This allows you to arpeggiate between notes. If you play 3 different MIDI notes, it will play 3 different MIDI things. There's a split mode for this one too, and some timing if you want to. There's some extreme time values, as you can see. Maybe this should be a bit. Okay, no, that's also very extreme. I thought maybe you wanted this to be a bit longer, but I don't think you really need it. We have this step sequencer here. You can turn it off, and then you have the 3 different modes. The last thing, I don't know, sequencer mode. It allows you to open up maybe a MIDI file, and then it will play that MIDI file in a different key. I think that is what it will do. And you can set the root notes of your MIDI file, and yeah, different things there. Let's turn that off for now. There's a step sequencer here. You have to go to page 2 to turn it on, which is kind of strange. Let's make a understandable thing here. See how that works. Alright, 16 steps, velocity trigger. It allows you to trigger it from somewhere. Retrigger key draw. Free. Okay, I don't know how this works. It doesn't seem to be. Oh, you can. Okay. Okay, so what this does is it allows you to. It's a modulation source, which is almost like an LFO, but stepwise. So instead of having a free-flowing LFO, you can dial in exact values here, and you can modulate different things. So let's say we assign this to. Where can I choose the target? We can quantize it, for example, to 12, I think, and it allows you to. Let's make the ROM oscillator pitch, right? If I now turn the amount down a little bit, as you can hear, you can change pitch over time with this, and you can set a timing, and fairly useful feature. Instead of having to go through an LFO and make an LFO shape, you can just use this as your step sequencer. And then there's this key thing. Again, we went through this. This is all your basic playing settings, so like pitch bend, mono mode, that kind of stuff, and you can layer up different sounds there. We have a general here, we have more stuff. So that's pretty much the whole synth. It took us just about 2 hours to get through the whole thing, including a break. And now I want to design some sounds in it, so I'm gonna actually open up a new version of it. And let's see what we can make here. I want to make at least one bass sound and a lead sound. And see how fast it is, that kind of stuff. So, for our bass sound, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the mod oscillator. Gonna set wave mix to 1, and we should have a saw wave here. And we seem to have. Oh, we need to load the init preset, of course. What we're gonna do is we're gonna use the mod oscillator saw wave 1, set the wave mix to 1. Gonna turn all these knobs down because I don't want them. And actually you need to have the multiply at 1. Let's go to the multiply needs to stay at 1. I before said that you need to turn the multiply up, but this doesn't have to do with anything. We want to stay here. I'm going to use the stereo image to turn it into a mono sound source. Right? Yeah. That should be mono sound source. Now we're gonna set our decay. We're gonna turn up our sustain all the way, because we don't want to change the volume over time. We are going to turn the release down almost all the way. And we're gonna set a filter. Let's set a multi-mode filter here. Gonna turn the cutoff up, and we're gonna turn the low pass up here. And we're gonna assign this to our filter cutoff 1. Actually, we're gonna go in here and not do this. We're gonna go in ADSR 2. Turn it slightly up, give it a little bit of extra release, turn up the amount a bit, maybe the decay down a lot. As you can hear, there aren't really any, or as you can see, there isn't really any way to set precise values, so you have to do it by ear. But let's listen to it as a sound, what it sounds like. Right, we're gonna put a nice little rhythm down there. I'm gonna get rid of our on-beat notes really quickly. We're gonna put this at a more psychedelic trance speed. Hopefully we can ignore the thing. Something like this. We'll give it a little bit of distortion. We're gonna go soft distortion. We want to color it dark a little bit. I want to actually turn up the volume. For some reason, gain staging seems a little bit off in the plugin, which is pretty weird. Let's look at our EQ. Yeah, as you can see, it's too low to actually see what the fuck is going on. So we're gonna turn. Oh, I'm gonna turn this to 100, and I'm gonna turn this up until we get a usable signal. As you can see, we need to turn it up by 20 dB before it's actually usable. You can see that we have a lot of rumble down there. Maybe that's something they could fix. Allow you to, or upgrade the whole sound engine a little bit so that we have less rumble and less artifacts. I think it's the same stuff as our high plug though, just because we're using a lot of CPU and it's just new. All these little bugs are gonna come out, but as you can hear, very nice little sound here. It's very easy to make. If you want to set it to 24 dB filter, you can do that. You can turn down the resonance to get that nice little low end. So to make a psytrance bass, very easy. Nothing you walk into. Maybe one last thing we want to do before I open up the next one is to let's quickly load this. It's gonna take a little while to load, but again, early development, this kind of thing happens. I want to set this thing to, okay, so it's already on retrigger, so that should be, as you can hear, all the oscillators or all the sounds sound the same. The only difference being that glitchy sound, which again they're gonna get rid of. So now let's try something else, a little bit more complex, a psytrance squelch sound maybe. We're gonna again initialize the preset. I'm gonna go and turn off menu sounds. We have this nice little FM sound. We're gonna change the wave to a saw and turn off FM, this thing, and turn the wave mix to 1. Release is going down a bit. Gonna set a 24 dB multi-filter here. I'm gonna turn down the low pass. I'm gonna turn up the band pass. Let's set our lowest value here, and we're gonna click the amount thing here and set our amount to filter cutoff here. Turn this up, and now we can start dialing in some settings here. Nice little pluxy. Nice little squelchy. You can let's add some effects. I'm gonna quickly add a delay and reverb. We want to high pass both the delay and the reverb. Maybe you can add a little bit more with a crusher. Bit reducer. Kinda want to turn this down a little bit. Nice little sound here. Again, we are having problems with the gain staging throughout the plugin. One last thing we can do is we can just turn this thing down. I don't like the delay and reverb on this particular sound. I like them in general, but we're probably gonna get a better effect out of delay and reverb from our standard DAW stuff. But this is a cool sound. Again, as I said, it's fairly powerful synth. Let's try something else. I already did some sound design before I started the stream yesterday evening. I want to do a pad next and kind of use the ROM oscillator to see if we can get a cool sound out of that. We'll maybe do a pluck and try some different things there. And then I want to wrap up the stream and start preparing for the actual review video for my YouTube after we've done some of this stuff. So let's make a little pad out of this, a little bit of detune. We'll give it some attack. Slightly turn it down on the FM, I think. Let's use the surface again. Maybe the soft one. No, adds a little bit too much noise there. I'm also gonna try this thing. Gonna try some morphing stuff. This seems like a distortion unit, almost. Okay, we'll filter it out. Analog mod, what is this? Is this a low pass filter? You can turn this on to be your ADSR. We're gonna slightly allows you to make a nice little warm synth. I do have to say that once you like get into it and do all the things that you would normally do, it sounds warmer and almost like more saturated than Serum. Serum is very clean, very precise sound design, and this is a little bit more analog sounding kind of stuff, which is pretty cool, especially like this analog filter. I like that a lot. Let's try some. I want to again delay reverb this. I find the silent warm sound nicer than Serum. Yeah, in some cases you want that warm sound, like pads and that kind of stuff, which again you could achieve that in Serum if you really wanted to. There are some waveforms that are not the standard wave sound that come from like analog synths and stuff. But it's more focused indeed on the precise sound design, making everything as clean as possible. And I always wanted like a toolbox that is more analog, and I've never been able to get Silent to work on this machine. So if they actually fix all the things that's wrong with this plugin, I think I will be using this a lot more for like breakdowns and stuff. But yeah, having this warmer sound is just it's a little different. It means that you don't have the extreme control over your sound that you would normally want if you're doing like more psychedelic sound design, where you need really precise filters, really precise oscillators if you can get it. But it's okay, I guess. This is then also not made for psytrance sound design, so it's more an EDM synth, and EDM tends to be nicely saturated sounds. So I guess it kind of depends on what you need. Let's give it some nice little stereo width. I really like the stereo imaging module in this thing. I think it works really well. Like having control over the loudness of the mid to side ratio, as well as how much widening you apply to the sound, is pretty cool. Normally you just have either control over how much mid signal or how much wide signal there is, or it could be like wider, where you just have a widening tool which applies some comb filtering or some random stuff to make it actually sound wider. But this has both, which is not very normal, but it's kind of cool. Okay, let's quickly get down the MIDI so we can actually make something that works with a potential melody. Just gonna quickly put this down. Nice little sound there. Now what you can do at this point, oh, I want to turn this off, is if I go to key, you can actually double layer this thing. Or maybe even more than that. Which is really powerful. As you can hear, we currently still have there's still some problems with like the reverb also randomly cutting out. I might want to report that. I don't remember if that was on the original post where they had the bug things. Let's see, what else can we add to this to make it better. What is this ensemble thing? Let's turn it on and see what it does. It's kind of like the hyper in Serum. Slightly gonna turn the amount down here. It's almost like the hyper thing in Serum. You can also see we have the same controls. You have the mix, the depth, and the rate. It kind of changes. So this would be all the same sounds, just slightly differently tuned, and this would introduce some randomness to the tuning, and then you can set how fast that randomness is gonna go. This one comes with very cool and use of visuals. You can really see how it like becomes faster and slower, and how it's more or less randomness, and also the mix kind of shows what's going on here, in that it creates more voices. So yeah, that's probably almost everything I have to say about that sound. Finally, I want to try out the ROM thing inside an actual sound design thing. Trying to make use of that, maybe to make like a plug or something. Let's see, ROM oscillator. Oh, we need to initialize it again. Oh. I don't want this in it. Let's go to ROM oscillator. Let's see, let's use this. Actually, you know what? If we go to here and say plug tone, will it? It will also select a random sample. That's pretty cool. It will also turn on the reverb, which I don't like. I would love it if it would just leave the effects to me. Because it also randomized the reverb, I think. If we go back, we can check actually. Okay, so it doesn't randomize the reverb, I guess. But does it turn it on? Yeah, you can see that it turns on the reverb, which is kind of weird. Would be cool if it didn't do that. And maybe if we bypass effects, we can... No. It just turns on the reverb whenever you do that. Whenever you try to generate a plucky tone, it will turn on reverb. So keep that in mind. That's something it does. I don't know why. I'm pretty done. I think I'm gonna start writing my final review video. And I think tomorrow we'll get back into normal sound design stuff. Back to some tools that I actually know. And I'll do another stream on Genesis Pro once all the issues get resolved, so that we can actually dive very deep into its workflow and its sound design, and go over some of the cool features that it has and make some more sounds with it. And yeah, for now, do I think this synth is worth it? Seeing as it costs €1 to get plus 21 cents of taxes, definitely get it. It's one of the most powerful synths out there if everything gets fixed, and for that price, it's easy decision. Even if they don't fix like all the issues I have with the navigation and stuff, that's still something you just can learn and get into. They just need to fix the clicking noises and the random reverb shutting off, and then it will be good. But for now, yeah, I'm gonna end it here. I hope you had fun watching my stream. I'm going to upload this stream together with my review, I think, for YouTube. Maybe it would be interesting for them to see like the whole thing, how I discovered everything, and kind of go through that. So if you want to rewatch this thing, it's gonna go up on YouTube. I'll have it unlisted, and from the review you can go to this one. So yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye bye.